Morning, everyone, and welcome to the launch of Beyond the Cost. My name is Hlumela Dyantyi. I am the campaign manager at DGMT Trust, and I'm so excited to host this discussion today. We have four amazing panelists with us, but first let me start by telling you what exactly the report is about. So Beyond the Cost, what does it really cost young people to look for work, is a research report that Youth Capital did in partnership with the Center for Social Development in Africa at UJ. And the report really focuses on young workers, job seekers' experience in terms of looking for work, how much it costs, and it really looks at data-like platforms and zero-rated platforms and how that aids the work-seeking process. I myself am a former serial job seeker. And I actually wrote an op-ed in the Mail and Guardian earlier this year, sharing my experiences with the difficulties of that. I spoke about the difficulties in terms of data, spoke about the difficulties of transport, the difficulties in terms of the recruitment systems, and a whole lot of barriers and blockades that stand in the way of young people. And what I really want us to look at is a recent tweet that I saw that touched my heart and kind of captured the state of the youth unemployment crisis in our country. Leti is sharing that tweet for us, but I'm just going to read it for you. It says, looking through CVs for an internship position, the one candidate was born in 2002 and the other was born in 1989. This is a terrible country. Now, obviously, the mood of that tweet is very saddening. It's a tone of disappointment, but I really don't want this conversation to focus on that. I think we all want to have hope by the end of this. And that's something else that I really love about the report, that it does speak into the existing solutions that exist. And it really zooms into that. One of my favorite things about Youth Capital is that they're very connected to young people, speaking to young people and hearing the voices of young people. So they really worked hard at collecting this online survey where they spoke to over 2,200 young people, asking them about their experiences on job seeking and trying to find how can we open the gates and the barriers to make the process more equal for everyone and to streamline the process so that we do get more young people into the job market. So I'm going to introduce our panelists now. First off, we have Kristal Duncan-Williams, who is the lead at Youth Capital. And then we have Senzelwe Mthembu, who is a researcher at the Center for Social Development in Africa. And then we have Duma Gqubule, who is a financial journalist. I don't know if you guys would like to say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for
being
here
everyone. Today. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. Okay, so we really want this discussion to be engaging. We have started a poll system. This is actually a tryout, so please be patient with us, where we will be asking you a few questions. And all you have to do is click on the link and tell us how you feel, and then we will be broadcasting the answers for those questions. I am going to share my screen now so you can see the first question. So the first question is, do you think job seeking locks young people out of opportunities? I am going to share the link with you now in the chat. And if you just click on that link, you're able to answer that question for us. Okay. And then I'll share the responses to that poll as soon as we delve more into the discussion. So I really want to start focusing on you, Duma. Duma, we really want to discuss job seeking today and the costs and how these hinder young people. I really like this article that you recently did in the Business Day, where you spoke to how much the national government prioritizes youth unemployment, how much it prioritizes solutions for that. I want you to really tell us about those barriers that young people face. And I really want you to help us paint a picture on the severity of youth unemployment in our country. How is it looking right now?
Thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this panel discussion. I think what I've been doing a lot of research on our economy, and what I need to say to people, the most important thing is you have to understand the scale of the crisis. Yeah, it is a humongous crisis. We're talking about 12.4 million people who are unemployed, 12.5 million people in South Africa who are unemployed. And if you look at people who are aged 15, and that's 46% of the population is unemployed. And then if you look at people who are 15 to 24, that is 2.6 million people who are unemployed. The unemployment rate for those people is 77%. So if you look at people who are 15 to 34, 7.4 million people are unemployed. That is 60% of the total number of people who are unemployed. And that is, so that's 60% unemployment rate amongst people of. So what I try to say is that people need to understand that you need to, when you address this problem, you have to put in the kitchen sink at this problem. And what I found looking at the article is that unfortunately in South Africa, it's not the responsibility of every government department. I had a meeting with the president recently, where he called me just before the State of the Nation address. And I tried to explain to him, I said, you know, we can have economic growth of 6% that everybody wants, but by 2030, there'll still be 11.3 million unemployed people. So we must do more than just grow the economy. And I also pointed out that unemployment, it's not on that. Everybody says they believe in this national development plan. It's got a target to create, I can't remember how many jobs by 2030, and it's going to 5.4% GDP growth, but it's not the responsibility. The president never talks about those targets in any of his State of the Nation addresses. The Treasury, I read all the budget documents. It's not their responsibility. And the Reserve Bank also, the Treasury is focused on debt. The Reserve Bank is focused on inflation. So if the most important institutions in our country are not focused on this unemployment issue, then it's no surprise that we're not addressing it. And then the second thing I want to say is that I'm a big supporter of the basic income grant. And I've been working with the Social Policy Institute doing research on the basic income grant. So what we are proposing in a report that's coming out soon, it's a bit too late, it will take too long to finish this report, is that there's 3 poverty lines in South Africa. There's a food poverty line of 624. There's the lower bound poverty line of 890, and then there's the upper bound poverty line of 1,335. So we are saying that this grant, we modeled 2 scenarios for the grant. It will address the cost of people searching for jobs. So the first scenario is given to adults aged 19 to 59. And these are people who traditionally before the who weren't covered by Social Security before the COVID grant. And then the second scenario is that it should be given to children as well. Children currently get a child support grant of 480 Rand a month. And so we've done the financial modeling for those 2 options. So it would go to children and adults. That's the one that I prefer. And it would virtually eliminate, we put a 3-year implementation period. It would eliminate income poverty in 3 years. It is affordable. I did all the numbers and we can do it. It doesn't even blow the debt to GDP ratio. It's an increase of about 2 percentage points in our debt to GDP ratio. It's a small cost that we have to pay because, as you say in the report, it's costing people 1,000 Rand it's unconscionable. So we have to provide support to the people, South Africans, to be able to afford this cost of searching for jobs. I don't want to take too much time. I like other people speak as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that insight, Duma. I really like that you mentioned how much it's costing young people to look for work, because this research report does build on from the Siaka study from 2019, which shockingly revealed that young people are spending about 938 Rand a month looking for work. And that is obviously a shocking number, especially as an unemployed young person who probably is not receiving an income, or if there is some sort of income that you're receiving on the side or having to ask for pocket money from family members or friends. 938 Rand a month is a lot of money. And that's on various things from agency fees, as I mentioned before, from the cost of data, finding clothing to look presentable for interviews, all of the things that you need to be able to be a perfect candidate and land the perfect job. So I really want to move on to you now, Senzelwe. I want you to take us through this YACA study that was done in 2019, because this is a build on from that. Can you discuss some of those insights for us from that study?
Sure. So this YACA study, the purpose really, or the main aim was to test the labor market and secondary education outcomes of 8 youth employability programs who offered a combination of technical and soft skills training. And so what we did is we conducted a pre and post-test survey with just under 2,000 young people aged 18 to 35 as they entered these programs at the end of the program. And then we followed up with them again a year later. And then we did the last follow-up with them 2 years after they had exited these programs. And we tested these outcomes on their own, but then also in combination with the financial capabilities treatment intervention, which consisted of financial literacy training, and then the option to open up a zero-fee savings account. And really the thinking behind this, or where, a combination of adding this treatment intervention, it came from a previous study that was conducted in Ghana called the Youth Save. And it was really just about what asset building in the form of savings and financial literacy could potentially do to improve outcomes for young people. We know, as the Beyond the Cost study reveals, how high the cost of work seeking are for young people. And so we really wanted to kind of put that to the test and see if that would have any improved outcomes. And then we also had in-depth interviews with a sample of young people once they had completed the programs. We asked, so our survey was quite lengthy. We asked a number of questions about youth demographics, their family characteristics, income and asset ownership, financial capabilities, their household situation and food security, psychosocial indicators, previous employment and earnings and job characteristics, and I could go on. But what we learned was, one, that youth employability programs, broadly speaking, they do play a critical supportive role. We saw in our qualitative data that they helped young people feel a sense of support and belonging, and they filled in for a lack of bridging social capital. We all know that unemployment for young people can be very isolating, and that they don't have enough knowledgeable people in their lives who can refer them to these opportunities. We also realized that these programs were locally accessible. They were low to no cost for young people. And, as I've said previously, they offered the support on young people's journey into the labor market. Also important is that young people, while they were participating in these programs, their work-seeking costs were significantly reduced. And I can speak a little bit on that later, but essentially, if you're part of a program that's offering you this training where you can access sort of mentorship, support, guidance, resources, the internet and all of that, your costs will be significantly reduced. With regards to employment outcomes, at endpoint, we had 28% of the remaining sample who had found and retained employment. And when we compared that sample to a matched quarterly labor force survey sample, we saw that the graduates of these programs were 11 percentage points more likely to be employed. And so we were seeing that they were on a better pathway into the labor market than their counterparts. But again, you know, others could argue this is a small number, it's a small percentage. And I think what that then talks to is the fact that employment outcomes were different depending on the types of training offered. So it's not just that youth employability programs who are offering this training is going to work for all young people in all situations. We noticed that matching was associated with the largest gains in employment. And so what that is when a program not just trains a young person blindly, but when a program focuses on training to employer demands and actually bringing young people into contact with employers, that's really where you're going to see, you know, any kind of significant difference. The second most effective type of training was the financial capability component. And what that is those who received this intervention were more resilient in their job search. They were better able to manage work-seeking costs in the context of low household incomes. And their employment outcomes were improved by a small percentage, so 9 percentage points, relative to those who did not receive financial capabilities training. But we still need to further investigate this mechanism, which drives this positive effect. And then lastly, soft skills training was found to be a significant kind of, you know, aid in labor market outcomes, especially when young people had lower levels of education. It helped facilitate their entry into the labor market. And so building skills that are required in the workplace, such as conflict management, teamwork, confidence, that also emerged as a key program element that had positive gains. Just to say, I completely agree with everything that Duma is saying. And this is just looking at the supply side, right? So this is looking at what interventions were being implemented on the supply side, so on the side of young people. I think we all know that on the demand side and how the labor market and how the jobless growth is affecting this issue on the other side as well. So yeah, that's what we learned through the study.
Thank you so much, Senzelwe. If anyone doesn't have access to the study or don't know where to find it, you can find it on Youth Capital's website. It's under the resources. And I just want to delve more into that, Senzelwe, into a lot more of what you said. Another finding that I found interesting from the report was that 84% of young people were having to choose between spending money on looking for jobs or on basic things like food, basic needs, basically. And I really like the foreword that Professor Lauren Graham writes, where she says that work opportunities and driving skills development alone won't make an impact if young people continue to be locked out of accessing opportunities due to income poverty. We will continue to leave far too many young people behind. And in this context, I really want to know the relevance of Beyond the Cost. As you know, we've discussed that a lot of young people are locked out because they don't even have the income to pursue job seeking or to continue to pursue it.
Yeah, this is true. So a lot of parallels between the SIACA study and the Beyond the Cost study. We were finding these narratives as well in our qualitative data. You know, and even young people speaking to the fact that their social networks were also being kind of tampered with, because when you borrow money from a relative, kind of with the promise and the hopes that you will find employment eventually, that adds to a lot of frustration. And I think that, you know, this report, what it highlights is, one, the importance of access, of social inclusion, and the need for bridging the gap for the most excluded in society. One of the findings was that, and I think we all know this, geographical location and the cost of work seeking are key barriers that lock young people out of the labor market, alongside a number of other issues such as gender, race, age, low education levels, and the list goes on. And looking at, the context of 2022, we can now add the negative impacts of COVID to that list of barriers. And young people, unfortunately, have been and continue to be at the back foot. And the study is relevant, one, because of its timing and its relevancy, that it's building on previous research. I think that's really important as well. But not only, as you said in your introduction, does it highlight the key challenges around youth unemployment, but it also offers and looks into solutions. And it assesses how these solutions are being utilized by their beneficiaries. It's also asking us to consider what can be improved. I will just remark that it's quite unfortunate that almost 3 years after the release of the SIACA study, where already we were seeing these high costs of work seeking, that even today we're still seeing very high work seeking costs. Things have not improved. We're seeing shocking unemployment statistics, as Duma has mentioned. And so things just continue to get worse. And so the report, I would say, is, and the relevancy is that it's forcing us all to urgently work towards solving this issue of young employment. And it's saying to us that young people can no longer be an afterthought. This really is of critical importance that we figure out how to resolve the issue of youth unemployment.
Thank you so much, Senzelwe. I want to move on to you, Kristal. And I want to focus now on the insights from the report. You do focus on data and specifically transport in this. And you do say that young people are spending between 250 to 499 Rand a month on data and transport to look for jobs. And I really want you to tell us more about that. Why is it that we needed, first of all, the study? And also, why is it that there's so much being spent on these specific amounts? I know the COVID-19 pandemic had a huge role in this because we saw a lot of more job interviews moving to the virtual space. And we saw a lot of young people having to learn technical literacy, for example, and having to afford to buy data or use data-led platforms. So I really want you to take us through that. Why is it that those two specific costs were what you chose to focus on the most in this report?
Thanks, Hlumela. And so just to contextualize the report, and there was a question in the chat around who conducted the research. So the report we're launching today is a collaboration between Youth Capital and Open Dialogue SA, which is a research hub as well. And why we chose to do this study now is that we really were getting anecdotal information from young people in our network around how COVID had impacted the way they look for work, the ability to look for work, the resources they have to look for work. And we really wanted to understand that a little bit more deeply. We had no intention of doing anything as intensive and comprehensive as the SIACA study was, but we wanted to build on some of the highlighted findings there and the ones that we thought were relevant in the context of lockdown and how young people were kind of navigating job seeking in 2021. And so we also have to give a shout out to Hire Me and JobJack, who helped us share the survey. So it was an online survey, and we understand that has its limitations. Obviously, there are many young people who don't have access to data or couldn't access the survey as an online survey, but we did end up with over 2,000 respondents. And so, listening to these findings today, Youth Capital always wants to forefront that we're really trying to put young voices at the center of the conversation, what it's like for young people now. And so we own that there are, there are young people that were excluded from being able to do this survey. And I just want to make that clear up front. And why we chose to focus on data and transport in our findings here is because we knew from the SIACA study, in 2019, that that's where the bulk of the money was being spent. And so given the fact that we were all moving into this online world in COVID and lockdown, but also at the same time, fuel prices have gone up quite a lot. And we know that transport is a barrier for young people. And so we wanted to understand those two cost drivers, given that we knew from the SIACA study that those were the biggest ones. So how we conducted our study was we just had multiple choice questions, and we gave young people kind of brackets of that they could choose. So either 0 to 250, 250, 500, and over 500. And the bulk of these brackets of spend can be seen in the slide now. So the majority of people spent between 250 and 500 on transport, and also spent between 250 and 500 on data. And you can see that printing and application fees are a lesser amount of that. And I think, as Senzelwe has already said, it's alarming that, 2-3 years later, since 2019, nothing's really shifted for young people. Even though we think, oh, life is easier now, things are online, that should be easier for young people. It's not easier for young people. The cost of data in this country is still a barrier. Young people still are having to travel to, maybe it's to get something certified. It might be an online application, but there's a requirement that you have a certified copy of your documents. That still requires a trip to the police station or the post office, which costs young people money. So I think it's important to understand these nuances, and that's really what we were trying to get out with this report. And I think, if we look at the fact that young people are borrowing, 70% of young people are saying they're borrowing money from a family member. These aren't mutually exclusive options. They could take multiple options. But, some people have some savings. People are using grants. We wanted to understand if people were using the SRD grant for job seeking. But you can see the majority of people are still saying that they're getting the funds for job seeking from their family members, and that over 8 in 10 young people are having to choose between looking for work and buying food. And I think this is an alarming statistic that should all leave us with a pit in our stomach, because this is the reality. Young people can choose to eat, or they can choose to look for work. And I think we need to address this if we really want to unlock. We understand that there are limited opportunities. Duma has spoken to that, and the economy is what it is. But if we really want to increase the potential of young people to get the jobs that do exist, then we have to speak about what the cost truly is for young people in 2022.
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely does put a knot in my stomach. I want us to go to the findings of the poll. Just going to share my screen with all of you. So 100% of people are saying that obviously job seeking costs do lock young people out of opportunities. And the next question we'd like to put forward to everyone is, whose responsibility do you think it is to take care of this crisis? I will drop the link now for you to answer the poll. Please let me know if it's working. But Duma, I want to go back to you now. Sorry. Okay. So I think a lot of us in civil society, sorry. Yeah. So the survey also found that 4 in 10 of the respondents work for more than a year before finding an actual job. And this is confirmed by the quarterly labor force survey, which also states that in Q2 of last year, we had 3 out of 4 unemployed young people who have been looking for a job. So do you think that the numbers are greater? Do you think the numbers are increasing? What are your thoughts on the numbers from this smaller survey and the QLFS survey?
No, I think it's an excellent report. And like Kristal, the 84% of people who have to choose between eating and paying for the cost, it's heartbreaking. And yeah, it's horrible. And in terms of most of the, I don't have the figures in front of me, but yeah, the stats in the QLFS do show that most people struggle to find employment. Yesterday on the show with Kathy Mutlathala, a 28-year-old guy said that he had been searching for a job since 2018. And he hadn't been able to find a job. He had a national diploma in something. So while the report does look at the supply side, which is good, there's also, we should also bear in mind the demand side, as Senzelwe was saying, constraints in terms of finding for jobs. And I don't know which statistic I should put out, but since December 2008, the economy has shed, let me just look at the number, 225,000 jobs. So there's 225,000 less jobs over the 13-year period. And the labor force, the people who are going into the economy, has increased by 6.3 million people. So we are not creating opportunities for the 500,000 people who are entering the labor force every year. So if the labor force has increased by 6.3 million people and the employment has dropped by 225,000 people, we have a 6.5 million increase in unemployment from 6 million in December 2008 to 12.5 million in December 2021. So I was also interviewing Ravi Naidu, the head of the Yes campaign, and he talks about the importance of the first job. You know, and if I look back to my career, yeah, the first job is critical, because in the first job, that's where you get the networks to be able to get your second job, you know. So after the first job, I didn't have to go for interviews. It must have been easier in my days, you know, but people would see my work. I would get jobs not through formal, you know, answering job ads and so forth, you know. So I don't know. So the other thing that we are looking into the report is that we need to create, I was talking to people from Scotland yesterday. I went to university in Scotland. They were saying that they're debating, because Scotland believes in the basic income grant, as to whether you can provide certain, what you call it, jobs for young people through expanded public works program. So that is an issue that we have to look at, because we have to expand our public works program have to create much more jobs than they're doing now. So what's happening, I did an analysis of what they're doing. They create about 400,000 full-time equivalent jobs a year, which is a drop in the ocean compared to what is demanded. If you look at the National Youth Development Agency, the National Youth Service creates about 12,000 opportunities a year. So I do think that in addition to providing the young people with basic income, we should think about ways of increasing public employment programs. And in the discussion I had with the president, I said, you know, we have to make the government an employer of last resort. They must be given skills that will pathways to the job to get the first. So once you're in the first job in public employment, theoretically, it should be easier to get the second job and the third job and so forth. So I agree with what Ravi was saying, that we should focus somehow on the first job. That not that everything else will be hunky-dory after that, but I don't know. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Duma. No, you're definitely, I definitely agree with you on that, because it does also build your confidence as a job seeker. Not only is it good for your social capital, but it really does help to build your confidence. I really want to mention one thing.
Yeah, sorry. We'll talk later, but there's a there's a guy who he used to help me in the house, and we'd help him. We're trying to help him in terms of just giving him odd work to do in the house. He eventually found a job, and his first job, Clement, I couldn't believe it. Clement actually had been unemployed for so many years. And then I met Clement. Clement called me many years later to thank me for whatever. And he's now a manager of a motorcycle shop in Edenvale. And he was complaining that, no, the bosses are racist and, he doesn't like this job anymore. And I said, but Clement, do you remember where you were for so many years? You couldn't get a job. Please hang on to that job. But anyway, yeah, but Clement got the first job. And Clement is still, she's still working. Although, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I can also relate to that. I have a lot of friends who struggled for years to get a job, but when they got their first decent job, it really kind of helped build their confidence in the job market. Duma, I also really want to touch on some of the solutions that are presented in the report, the existing solutions that we have. And I want us to talk about cash transfers. Now, Beyond the Cost outlines that cash transfers can represent one of the solutions. However, we know how much conflict there has been regarding social grants and cash transfers because of the fact that we are in a country that is stricken with so much poverty. We have such high levels of poverty in our country, and preliminary findings on the Social Relief Distress Grant have indicated that these grants would, in most instances, often be used to support basic needs in the household and not solely on job-seeking costs. And I think even if you do your own research and you look at, for example, the household food basket per month, how much that is in our country that's updated each month, you will see how expensive the cost of food is and how a lot of people would use that money for those grants to kind of fulfill their more basic needs. Especially also looking that a lot of young people are the breadwinners of their families. They're the only sources of income. So there's a lot of people relying on them to do that. So what are your thoughts exactly on cash transfers in terms of dealing with the crisis of youth unemployment or youth grants and subsidies? What do you think about that, Duma?
Yes, so as I said at the beginning, I'm a big supporter of the basic income grant. And during the pandemic, we ran an incredible campaign, many people in civil society, and we forced a meeting with the president. There was with the campaign, the big coalition, which was held in January. And I think we made sure that the inadequate social relief of distress grant wasn't discontinued, because you remember what happened after they discontinued it the first time. We had the riots in KwaZulu-Natal, the July riots last year. So I'm a big believer in social grants. I've done scenarios on this basis. What people need to understand is that people will spend the money into communities, which will grow the economy. And you must set it at a level that is high enough that it must go beyond subsistence, because the food poverty line is 624 rands a month. So if you're just buying food, the multiplier effects you must go beyond meeting basic income. And the thing that distressed me, that made me say that also the child grant must be included, must be converted into a basic income grant, is that the research shows that most of the child grants do not go to the child, they go to what you are saying, Hlumela, is that sort out problems in the family. So you find that this grant is being shared by people who are not children in the family. They don't have a choice, you know what I'm saying? So that as well. So I just think that it's so, and the research has shown, we've looked at many pilots in countries like Kenya. The Kenyan ones are fascinating, where they got this grant, which was in the pilots, which is substantial, and they used it for more than meeting basic needs. They invested in agricultural equipment, they invested in different things, in education of the children, and so forth. So the key is to hit a sweet spot that it isn't used for basic survival needs, and they can be pooling within the household to meet the different needs of the households. So just quickly, without taking too much time, then we talk about the expansion of the public works program. I was shocked to discover how little people earn on that program. So we've proposed that the salaries that are paid on the expanded public works should increase, and they should be restructured to provide full-time work. And then I also did scenarios that, what if we created industrial policies that would incentivize employment of labor intensive? Because, you know, I looked at many Asian countries and how they created jobs. And they started off doing basic stuff, you know, like, how can I put it? They were uneducated. In South Korea, the average education when they started on their development path in the 1960s was the average of 3 years of school per person. South Korea today is the most educated country in the world, with 70% of people between the ages of 20 and 35 having tertiary qualifications. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that you start off by incentivizing your labor-intensive clothing, textiles, where you don't need a high level of education. But as the education goes up, I mean, as the people, you provide the education on a mass scale, then you start doing more complex things on the value chains. And that is the most fascinating part of the research, is that the difference between the scenario that I painted earlier on, where we have 6% growth on its own, and we have 11.3 million people, and then you change the trajectory of growth so that you have more jobs per rand that you invest. It creates amazing scenarios where you reduce the unemployment to 4 million people by 2035, and you achieve this full employment by 2035. So for me, there's a whole list of things that we can do. We also looked at universal public services. You know, I'm a big believer in the fees must fall. So you must, the fees must fall. Yeah, I really believe that the fees must fall. And I did spend a lot of time researching that. So I believe that there has to be a basket of universal public services to supplement the basic income and the job guarantee. And I believe strongly we must take the profit out of education and health. So there's a lot of opportunities to expand the public sector in education and health, in caring jobs. And the last thing I want to say is that the scenarios we did on public employment, we need to actually employ 1 million more people in the public sector. I'll just give a quick one. I'll just say that if you look at the population, we had 1.2 million public servants in 1994. Last year, December, we had 1.2. So it hasn't kept up with the growth of the population. If it had kept up with the 48% growth of the population, we would have increased public employment by 600,000 people. Then I looked at, so there's so many shortages of people in the public sector. I'm talking about social workers, care workers, teachers, nurses, and so forth. So we should also be increasing the employment in the public service as well. And then the final thing is also in our public infrastructure program. So this month of May, that's what I'm busy working on, putting scenarios in which we can solve these crises of unemployment and income poverty for the youth especially. Yeah. And this is really, this panel has really influenced me to try and do something separate on youth unemployment. It has really been an inspirational panel. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Duma. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen again so we can look at the answers from the poll. Alrighty, so the last question was, whose responsibility is it to deal with the youth unemployment crisis in our country? We have 17% of people saying it's the private sector, 65% of people saying government, 4% of people saying individuals, and 13% of people saying civil society. Personally, I would say it's everyone's, but let's also hear from what our panelists have to say about that. I want to go back to you, Senzelwe. I really want us to look at young people's access to training opportunities and how we can connect them to those. I also want you to expand on platforms such as Youth Explorer that make the job-seeking experience a little bit easier for young people by connecting them to local libraries, for example, where they can use that to apply. Can you go into a bit of that for us, please?
Sure. Maybe just to comment as well on some of Duma's points, is there was a PhD candidate at the CSDA who did a very interesting study. I wish I remembered the title and the author, but it had something to do with livelihood creation strategies that people were employing using the grants they were receiving. So it is out there. People are doing amazing things with the grant, and I think we should look into how we can expand on that. But Duma also mentioned that alongside these cash transfers, we do need this basic kind of basket of services. And so this is really what I want to address is, you know, how do we enable young people to have or to access pathways in order for them to enter the labor market? So I think we know that young people need access to the right information from knowledgeable sources. We've spoken about social capital, And so I think it really is still important that we have this access to low-cost, youth-friendly spaces or hubs, and to look at what already exists and how to enhance those connections and pathways for young people. We're currently piloting the Basic Package of Support program in Atlantis in the Western Cape and Orange Farm in Gauteng, and we're set to launch a number of other pilot sites as well. It's an evidence-based intervention that aims to provide one-on-one tailored coaching services by trained child and youth care workers to youth who are not in education, employment, or training. And so we don't have concrete findings, but we are seeing that physical spaces where young people can access coaching and support, career guidance, assistance in developing action plans for their lives, assistance in signing up to platforms like sayouth.mobi, where they can get holistic support and be referred to relevant services in their communities is important. But alongside this kind of youth-facing component of the basic package of support, we're also trying to work with community services and to create a community of practice around, how to better service young people, and so that services can improve their delivery in order to promote young people's inclusion, their mental health, and kind of just general well-being. So what we want to do with the basic package of support is foster this reconnection to the education system and the labor market. But we also recognize that young people are not just job seekers. While that is a very important part of sort of how they see themselves in society, how they value themselves, part of their upward mobility, young people are experiencing a number of challenges. And so having support in all of that will eventually help link them back into the labor market and into the education system. We're already seeing some young people who are part of that pilot program. After just one session with a youth coach, they're getting a job. And it goes back to that conversation about the importance of getting a foot in the door, getting that first job. And we're also starting to see an openness by service providers based in urban metros to come out into more remote areas and service young people who are in need where they are. So again, this speaks to the costs and access issues and how to better kind of facilitate those connections. We're also seeing, so you asked me to speak a little bit about the Youth Explorer as well. So the Youth Explorer, I would say, is a really important tool that provides a range of information that is related to young people in one easy to access place and on that online platform. I think one of the challenges that young people express is being turned away after spending money trying to access a service that they need, or going to that service and finding that it no longer exists or that it has moved location. And I think the Youth Explorer can help mitigate that, and I'll explain how. One is just to say the Youth Explorer provides a range of information such as young people's education, their economic opportunities, their family and living environment, health-related kind of indicators, as well as the services. So it also maps the services that are available in a given area. So things such as libraries, police stations, clinics and hospitals, SASSA offices, you can see that in one easily accessible platform. And data and information are so important in informing how we do referrals and in informing how to make more effective referrals to young people. We don't want to give young people the runaround. In fact, we can't afford to give young people the runaround. And so what we've done as part of the basic package of support is we've trained youth coaches and other site team members how to use the platform to gather all this information about the communities that they work in so that they can make accurate referrals to young people, and also so that mobilizers in communities can go out and verify services. This is a platform that requires participation from service providers. So when we talk about that basket of services, we need them to understand the usefulness of the platform and to be willing and open to give us updated information about their operating hours, their GPS coordinates, who the contact person is at that site. And then we need the information to be updated so that we can connect young people to the services that they need. And so going out and finding out, if anything has changed is going to be really important.
Thank you so much, Senzelwe. Thank you. Last question. We are running a bit late, but I'd really like us to look into Zerorated platforms with Kristal. We also have a lot of interesting questions in the chat. I'm hoping that if you guys can still stay on for a bit longer, we can respond to some of those. But I think maybe, Kristal, you can also respond to this one about local libraries in rural areas not having access to the internet. But I also want you to specifically speak on how the survey showed us that 6 out of 10 respondents said that they have used a zero-rated or data-free platform to apply for a job, and 75% of those said it made it easier for them to apply for a job. Can you speak on some of the solutions there are around zero-rated platforms or low data platforms? Because my quarrel with them a lot of the time is when you look at sites like sayouth.mobi, as much as it is there, I'm not seeing as many opportunities on there as I would like to see. And I also know that a lot of my young friends do not even know about sayouth.mobi. So it really is an accessibility issue. And also a lot of the time with even the low data platforms, you find that like pictures are pixelated, or you can't click, you don't have access to certain parts that you have to fill in the application on. And it really makes the process difficult. So I really want you to talk more on zero-rated platforms and the solutions around that.
Thanks, Hlumela. And I just want to highlight again, I think everybody during COVID was like, oh, things are online, it's easier, it's cheaper. The government in Arambi were really pushing sayouth.mobi and saying it's a zero-rated platform and this is reducing barriers for young people and it's, creating access to opportunities. And on paper, all of that is true and all of that is wonderful, right? But we wanted to understand exactly, as you're saying, because the sense we were getting from our network, we're constantly talking to young people, and the sense we were getting from them is like, actually, it wasn't working for them for a number of reasons. And so I think this stat just shows that, that 6 out of 10 said they'd use some kind of platform, which is great. But only 2 out of those that had said they found a job via WhatsApp. So that just shows kind of how ineffective it almost is, even for those that are using the platform to connect them to an opportunity. But at the same time, those who are able to use these platforms, you can look at the quote there to say that virtual interviews are quite convenient. They spend less money on traveling and clothes, etc., and that's great. So I think the point I want to make is that these platforms exist. And they do reduce barriers for young people, but what we need to do is to really tweak them and refine them. So what do I mean by that? As you say, Hlumela, reports we get around zero rating is, sometimes there's an embedded video, an embedded form, things that require young people to click away from that zero rated site. And the minute they click away from that site, they need data. So then it negates the data free benefit. And so I think when people are designing these sites, when people are uploading information to these sites, it's important to remember that. 2, I think we really need to talk about WhatsApp bots and how we can use those. We know that the WhatsApp data bundles are one of the most effective data bundle packages, and it's something that most people will have access to. Secondly, WhatsApp is already a platform that young people are comfortable with, so there's no learning curve for young people to access how to navigate a new site or a new app that they might not be so familiar with. And I think, we unpack some of that in our Unlock Jobs Shift 2021 report, where we profile Go Mentor and the Zanokaino Network, which are organizations who work directly with young people and trying to place them in opportunities. And they kind of unpack a little bit about their technology with WhatsApp. So I think, just to not take too much time to go over this point, but to say that there are platforms that exist, but we need to work to figure out with mobile network operators, with employers, to make these sites more accessible, to make sure that all opportunities are loaded on a centralized site that young people can find, like sayouth.mobi, and to really understand how young people navigate these sites and to do work with young people. And then to link to Senzelwe's point about the basic package of support, which comes back to Mary's question, connection is an issue. Doing things online is never going to be a solution for all of South Africa, not in the short term. The infrastructure is just not there. And with load shedding, even if in theory you have network and cell phone towers, we know that load shedding makes those a moot point. So I think what we need to do is look at the other options, like the basic package of support, which is being piloted. And I think this leads me to the last point that I want to leave with the audience today, is to just say that, the cost of work seeking is a barrier for young people. It's a big barrier, but it's not the only barrier. If we really want to look at youth unemployment and we really start chipping away at those 9 million young people who are NEET, then we need to look at the entire journey that young people are on, from places of learning to places of earning. And that is what the action plan does, which is on the Youth Capital website. And Latifa is going to pop that into the chat now if you want to go and look at our action plan. As you can see, all of our work is a real collaborative effort. We are bringing in unlikely partnerships all the time. All of the work that we've spoken about today is a collaborative effort with other organizations, because no one organization, not even government, can solve this crisis. We need to work together. And so if you feel like you're aligned with what we've spoken about today, then please join us by signing on to the action plan, and we'll pop the form in the chat. Get in touch with us if you want to discuss anything that resonates with you. As Duma said, the point of the work that we do is not to say, oh, we found the answer now, and now we can all just carry on, but it's more springboard into unpacking what the solutions look like and making sure that those solutions really address the challenges that young people are facing on the ground today, and to continue to talk to young people about those solutions. And then I want to call on, employers to say, and understand the challenge of that young person you're trying to hire, whether that's by providing them with an Uber voucher to get to the interview, or providing them with a data voucher to join that Zoom call, and being gracious with them if they have bad connection or things, the connection keeps dropping, to really understand what it's like to be that young person on the other end of that call. We're not all government. We can't fix the big systemic things, like creating networks all across the country, but we can do our small part. And so I think I just want to leave the audience with that today. And I see that Leanne from Go Mentor has joined us today, and she's popped her info there if you're interested in their kind of WhatsApp bot technology. Thanks so much, Hlumela.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panelists for having such a fruitful conversation with us. I really hope that, as sad as the topic is, that we're still able to have some kind of hope. I really want us to open up any questions that we have. Understand that we are a bit over time, so you can also continue the conversation on Youth Capital's Twitter at Youth Capital SA. We will be sharing the recording of this conversation, so you can also comment on that. And you can also drop a message to Youth Capital. One of the questions that we did receive in the Q&A from Naval Ramisa is, how do we address unemployment and youth unemployment in particular? We need to generate a discussion around how to mobilize the structures in government to work with communities. A good example is the Israeli kibbutz system that addresses the delivery of various skills. Get the army to manage the process so that funds are properly accounted for and that operational aspects are properly managed. So we really have a question here around how we can work together in the different sectors. Not sure if one of our panelists would like to answer this.
I can jump in there, Hlumela. So I think, the government is trying to come up with a service like that through the National Youth Service, which was rolled out last year. And so, there are various programs under the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative and under the Presidential Employment Stimulus Package that looks at placing young people into community service work to get them that opportunity. And this is a great first step. And as we've seen with the Basic Education Employment Initiative, it's great, as Duma was saying, that first opportunity is really great. But I think what we must remember is we can never, these first opportunities can never be a long-term solution. They're always going to be finite, right? Whether that's 3 months, 6 months, a year. And what happens next is the question. And how do we use that term that we have that young person for? We're spending money employing young people, for that time. How do we make sure that that money is being used effectively in the sense that that opportunity really gives a young person a skill and, as Duma was saying, a social network, which we'll be talking about in more detail at Youth Capital in the coming months. So watch this space. We're going to be talking about social capital quite a lot. But we need to make those opportunities really count for the next opportunity. Otherwise, we're just throwing money at the problem. We see, we spoke about the Basic Education Employment Initiative a couple of months ago. Youth Capital has a report out on that, which we worked with Youth at Work and AutisA on to really understand whatever the short-term opportunity is in communities, in schools, whatever it is, what can we do in those short-term opportunities to make sure that they have a meaningful impact for young people to take the next step when that opportunity ends? And I think that's the important thing we need to focus on.
Wow. Thank you, Kristal. There's also a question that came for you, Duma. Someone said that Z83s were standing in their way. Can you respond to this, please?
I had to go and find out what Z83 is, and I think it's it has to do with what Kristal was talking about. I'm not sure what it is, and maybe Kristal can talk, but it seems to me that what she said is that
the government form, Duma.
Yeah, the form. But you also have to
very unnecessary form.
Yes. It seems like it's true.
Arguably.
Maybe you can answer, Kristal. But you also said that you, instead of loading the information in the site, you have to go outside the site and pay data. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually, the Z83 form, so disclaimer, my first job was under the police service, long story, but so I'm trying to remember from all those years ago, but it was like, it's a cumbersome process. There's like, you have to certify documents. So exactly, the Z83 form is a barrier. We bring this up with government quite a lot, actually, to say, if you really need certified documents, to make that the end point for the shortlisted candidates and not a requirement up front for everybody who, many of whom will never get the job.
Thank you. Do we have any, someone said Duma is fortunate to not know what a Z83 is, and I agree, that is privilege. Do we have any other questions from one of our participants?
Hi, Hlumela. I just see there's Piro's put a comment there that I just want to jump on. And sorry, guys, there's been quite a few questions in the chat. So we will try to, get to the questions and send it out to to everybody that is on the responded yes to attending the event at a later date, because I don't think we'll get to all the questions. We surely have missed some. But Piro said there's a need to support small enterprises. He runs an internet cafe in Alex, and he assists many young people to apply, but with limited resources, it's hard. Absolutely, Piro. I think we need to look at what incentives exist, and this is, falls under points 8, 9, and 10 within the Youth Capital Action Plan, to understand, existing government incentives, employment tax incentive, triple B E-rating, CETA funding. There's lots of pockets of money within the government system that small businesses are unable to unlock and access, that could be used, for them to employ a young person, for them to upskill a young person. And I think we need to look at how do we unlock the red tape, really, for these small businesses to access these existing government interventions and pockets of money.
Duma?
Comment on the SMMEs. I also feel strongly about the whole issue of the SMMEs. As a hobby, I follow the total funding that's provided to SMMEs and specifically Black SMMEs. In terms of the financial sector charter, there are targets that the banks have to lend to Black SMMEs. And so to cut a long story short, the Small Enterprise Finance Agency provides 1 billion rands for the whole country. The Land Bank has refused to provide me with statistics for a long period. The second issue is the National Empowerment Fund has not really got government funding since it was started. And they got a little bit from COVID, but they give about 300 million rands a year. So the total government contribution towards Black SMMEs is about 1.5 billion rands, which is a pitiful amount. The banks released a study during COVID to show that their total exposure to Black SMMEs was 21 billion. It was 0.4% of their total assets at the time. And for me, there is no explanation for that other than racism. And yeah, so the one on the, so we have to really provide more support in terms of the SMMEs, in terms of the support we give. But for me, the problem is a lack of funding. And someone has to convince me otherwise that there is funding, and I don't think there is funding. And there's another point I wanted to make, which I've forgotten. I'll jump in when I remember the point, but it's related to that as well. Yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of this conversation. Just one more question that I see that keeps popping up in the chat. The age group of the survey for Beyond the Cost was 15 to 34 years old. But we would really like to keep this conversation going, as I said before. Please keep in contact with Youth Capital. We have a lot more exciting work coming up. Well, not exciting, but insightful rather, because it is quite sad. But thank you so much for joining, guys. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you to our panelists for being with us today. And I hope that you take something home from this. Thank you, guys. Sign out now. Goodbye.